Before we begin our immersion, if you feel the call of this ancestral wisdom, I invite you to like this video and subscribe. It is a simple gesture, but it is your way of supporting the growth of these teachings and our community. Be sure to click the notification bell so you don't miss any step of this journey toward your personal evolution. Welcome to the circle.
In our modern economy, we are taught that the earth is a supermarket. We walk down the aisles of the world, taking what we want, paying a price in currency, and leaving without a second thought. But in the Indigenous worldview, there is no such thing as a free resource. There is only a gift, and every gift carries a responsibility. This brings us to a foundational ethic shared by many nations, from the Potawatomi to the Salish, the honorable harvest. The honorable harvest is a set of unwritten rules that govern our exchange with the living world. It is a protocol of restraint. It is the understanding that just because we can take something doesn't mean we should. Imagine you are standing in a field of wild berries or a forest of leeks. The modern impulse is to gather as much as possible, as quickly as possible, but the honorable harvest dictates a different path. First, you ask permission. You pause and address the plant. You ask, "May I take some of your bounty to feed my family?" You wait for an answer. This isn't a literal spoken word, but a moment of observation. If the plant looks stressed, if it is the only one of its kind in the area, the answer is no. The second rule is perhaps the most difficult for the modern mind. Never take the first one. The first one you see might be the only one. By leaving it, you ensure that the species survives. You wait until you see a community of them. The third rule, take only what you need and use everything you take. In a world of staggering waste, this is a revolutionary act of respect. To waste a life, whether it is a deer or a root, is a deep insult to the spirit that gave it. And finally, the most important step, give a gift in return. For many Indigenous people, this gift is often a pinch of tobacco, a sacred plant, placed at the base of the harvested being as a token of gratitude. It is a physical manifestation of the phrase, "You have sustained me, and I acknowledge your sacrifice." How does this make you a better version of yourself? It moves you from the role of a consumer to the role of a citizen of the earth. When you practice the honorable harvest, even in small ways, like how you consume energy or buy groceries, you develop a sense of satisfied sufficiency. You stop the endless hunt for more and begin to appreciate the enough. When you realize that your life is supported by the literal lives of others, you cannot help but become more humble, more grateful, and more intentional. You begin to understand that the highest form of human intelligence is not our ability to accumulate, but our ability to balance our needs with the needs of the whole. As you move through your week, ask yourself, am I harvesting honorably? Am I taking more than I need? And what am I giving back to the system that keeps me alive? In the modern world, we are obsessed with the line. We see time as an arrow, always moving forward, always demanding progress, always pointing toward an invisible finish line. We speak of saving time, spending time, and running out of time. This linear perspective creates a permanent state of low-grade panic. If time is a line, then every second that passes is a second lost forever. But the indigenous cultures of the Americas, from the Maya in the south to the Inuit in the north, view time through a different geometry. For them, time is a circle. It is a series of repeating cycles: the sun, the moon, the seasons, the breath. To the indigenous mind, nothing is ever truly lost, because everything returns in its own season. The spring does not replace the winter, it follows it as it always has and always will. This is not a philosophy of stagnation, but of rhythm. When you live by the circle, your relationship with productivity changes. In a linear world, you are expected to be at peak performance 365 days a year. But the earth does not work that way. A forest in winter is not failing because it isn't growing leaves, it is resting. It is gathering strength for the burst of energy that spring requires. Many indigenous nations structured their entire social and spiritual lives around these cycles. There were times for intense communal labor, times for storytelling, and times for deep, silent reflection. They understood that to force the growth phase during the rest phase is to invite sickness and burnout. How can you use this to become a better version of yourself? Stop trying to be an arrow. Start allowing yourself to be a cycle. Look at your own life through the lens of the seasons. Are you in a winter phase of your career, a time for quiet study and internal preparation? Or are you in a summer phase, a time for high activity and outward expansion? When you align your efforts with your natural internal cycles, you stop fighting against yourself. You find that you have more energy, not because you are working harder, but because you are working with the flow of the universe. The circle also reminds us of our accountability. In a linear world, we can throw things away and assume they are gone. In a circular world, there is no away. Whatever we put into the circle, whether it is a kind word or a toxic chemical, eventually makes its way back to us. By adopting a cyclical view of time, you replace the anxiety of the deadline with the peace of the rhythm. You realize that you don't have to do everything today because the sun will rise again. Your job is simply to be present for the phase of the cycle you are currently in. In our modern society, we often measure leadership by power, the ability of one person to impose their will on the many. We use the 51% rule, where the majority wins and the minority is silenced. But if we look at the Haudenosaunee, also known as the Iroquois Confederacy, we find a much older and more sophisticated model of human organization, the Great Law of Peace. The Haudenosaunee formed one of the oldest living participatory democracies on Earth. Their system was built on two revolutionary pillars, consensus and the seventh generation principle. Consensus is not just about voting, it is about listening until the collective mind is found. It assumes that every person in the circle holds a piece of the truth. In a council, you do not speak to defeat your opponent, you speak to contribute to the whole. If a decision cannot be reached, the council waits. They understand that a fast decision that creates division is far more dangerous than a slow decision that creates unity. But the most profound aspect of this wisdom is the timescale of responsibility. When the leaders of the 6 nations sat in council, they were required to consider the impact of their decisions not just on their children or even their grandchildren, but on the 7th generation yet to be born. They asked, will the water still be clean for them? Will the soil still be fertile? Will the stories still have a place to live? Well, this is the ultimate exercise in becoming a better version of yourself. Most of our modern stress comes from short-termism, the pressure to deliver results this week, this month, or this quarter. This narrow focus makes us reactive and selfish. When you adopt the 7th generation mindset, your perspective shifts from success to legacy. You begin to ask, is the way I am living today making the world better for someone I will never meet? This principle applies to your personal life as much as it does to the environment. How you handle your anger today affects the emotional health of your descendants. How you manage your integrity today sets the blueprint for those who will follow your lead. To live with the 7th generation in mind is to live with prophetic integrity. It means realizing that you are a bridge between those who came before and those who are coming after. You are the ancestor of the future. When you sit in your own personal council to make a decision, try to imagine those 7 generations sitting behind you, watching. Does your choice honor their future? If we all lived with this level of accountability, the spiral of modern chaos would lose its power, replaced by a steady, long-term commitment to the flourishing of life. We have explored the ethics of the harvest, the rhythm of the cycles, and the responsibility to the future. Now, we bring these concepts into the center of your daily life. The bridge between indigenous wisdom and your personal evolution is a single, powerful practice: active gratitude. In the Western world, we often think of gratitude as a reaction, something we feel after something good happens. But in the indigenous tradition, gratitude is a proactive state of being. It is a creative force. The Haudenosaunee begin every significant gathering with the Ohentan Kariwetquin, or the words before all else. It is a long, rhythmic address that thanks every part of the creation, from the tiny insects to the distant stars, for simply doing their jobs. When you practice active gratitude, you are not being polite to the universe. You are acknowledging the truth of your dependency. You are admitting that you did not create the air you breathe or the water you drink. This admission is the ultimate cure for the ego-driven stress of modern life. Here is your practice for integrating the cycle of reciprocity. 1. The morning address. Before you check your phone or look at your to-do list, take 60 seconds to perform your own words before all else. Acknowledge the sun for its heat, the water for its life, and your body for its resilience. By doing this, you start your day from a place of abundance rather than scarcity. You aren't starting at zero, you are starting with a wealth of support. 2. The reciprocal purchase. The next time you buy something, a coffee, a shirt, a tool, don't just think about the price, think about the harvest. Briefly visualize the plants, the people, and the earth that made that item possible. Offer a silent thank you to the source. This simple act breaks the trance of consumerism and restores the dignity of the living world. 3. The seventh generation check. Once a day, when faced with a choice, perhaps how to respond to a conflict or how to spend your evening, ask, what would the seventh generation think of this choice? Does this action build a good track for them to follow? This practice instantly pulls you out of petty anxieties and aligns you with your higher purpose. To become a better version of yourself is to become a person of reciprocity. You are no longer a taker moving through a silent world. You are a giver participating in a grand conversation. When you live in the cycle of taking and giving back, you find a deep, unshakable security. You realize that as long as you honor the web will honor you. You are moving away from the spiral of stress and into the circle of belonging. We move now from the world around us to the world within us. While the first half of our journey focused on our external relationship with the earth, the second half focuses on the internal landscape. To become a better version of yourself, you must first understand the architecture of your own spirit. Across the Great Plains and into the mountains, many indigenous nations, including the Lakota, Northern Cheyenne, and Anishinaabe, utilize a powerful conceptual tool known as the medicine wheel or the sacred hoop. The medicine wheel is a circle divided into 4 quadrants, representing the 4 directions, the 4 stages of life, the 4 seasons, and most importantly for our evolution, the 4 dimensions of the self: the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual. In our modern, Western-driven lives, we are often encouraged to live almost entirely in one quadrant, the mental. We value logic, data, and thinking our way through problems. But the wisdom of the wheel tells us that a person who is only mental is like a wheel with a flat side. It cannot roll. It can only thud. The east, yellow, represents the physical and the spring. It is the direction of new beginnings and the body. The south, red, represents the emotional and the summer. It is the direction of youth, passion, and heart. The west, black, represents the mental and the autumn. It is the direction of introspection, the setting sun, and the mind. The north, white, represents the spiritual and the winter. It is the direction of the elders, wisdom, and the breath. To use the medicine wheel for personal growth is to practice the art of honest assessment. Imagine your life right now. Are you overdeveloping your mental quadrant while your physical health withers? Are you so focused on spiritual concepts that you've neglected your emotional relationships? The medicine in the medicine wheel isn't a pill or a potion. It is balance. When an indigenous person feels sick or out of sorts, they don't just look at a symptom, they look at the wheel. They ask, which direction have I forgotten to face? Becoming a better version of yourself requires you to stop trying to perfect one area and start seeking the harmony of all 4. If you are stressed, the answer might not be more thinking, west. It might be more moving, east, more feeling, south, or more praying and silence, north. The wheel reminds us that we are whole beings. We are not just workers or thinkers. We are emotional, physical, and spiritual creatures. When we bring these 4 directions into alignment, we stop fighting against the gravity of our own lives. We begin to spin with the grace of the earth itself. In the modern world, we treat stories as entertainment, books we read to escape, or movies we watch to pass the time. But in indigenous cultures, stories are much more than that. They are the original instructions. They are the vessels that carry the laws of the land, the secrets of survival, and the blueprints for a meaningful life. From the Hopi of the Mesas to the Ojibwe of the Great Lakes, the oral tradition serves a vital purpose. It tells the people who they are. Think about the stories you tell yourself every day. Most of us carry an internal narrator that is quite unkind. This narrator tells a story of not enough, not productive enough, not successful enough, not young enough. This is a colonized narrative. It is built on the values of extraction and competition. Indigenous storytelling offers a different path, the medicine story. In many traditions, a story is not just told, it is given to someone who needs its specific medicine. There are stories of the coyote, the trickster, whose blunders teach us about the dangers of ego and the necessity of humility. There are stories of the great bear, teaching us about courage and the protection of the weak. These stories don't just entertain, they reshape the listener's reality. To become a better version of yourself, you must become the active storyteller of your own life. Consider the creation myth of your current situation. If you are going through a hard time, are you telling the story of a victim or the story of an initiate? Indigenous wisdom teaches that every trial is a part of a larger, sacred narrative. When you shift your internal language from "this is happening to me" to "this is a chapter of my unfolding," you regain your power. In the Cherokee tradition, there is a well-known story of the two wolves. It is said that inside every person, two wolves are fighting. One is filled with anger, envy, and greed. The other is filled with joy, peace, and kindness. When the grandson asks which wolf wins, the elder simply replies, "The one you feed." Your internal narrative is the food for your spirit. If you feed the story of your failures, that wolf grows strong and consumes your peace. If you feed the story of your resilience, your ancestors' strength, and your connection to the living world, that wolf leads you toward balance. Today, take a moment to look at your personal mythology. Is it a story of isolation, or is it a story of kinship? You have the authority to rewrite the script. You are not a random accident of biology. You are a continuation of an ancient, breathing story. When you align your personal narrative with the values of the earth, respect, reciprocity, and courage, you become a character worthy of the epic life you were meant to live. In our modern existence, we are terrified of being alone. We fill every silence with a podcast, a screen, or a conversation. We have forgotten that silence is not an empty void. It is a crowded room filled with the voices of the self and the spirit that we are usually too busy to hear. In many indigenous cultures, most notably among the Lakota, where it is called Hambalsaya or crying for a vision, and the Anishinaabe, there is a practice that serves as the ultimate forge for the soul, the vision quest. A vision quest is a rite of passage. A person, often a young person seeking their path or an adult seeking guidance, is sent out into the wilderness alone. They take no food, they take no company. For several days and nights, they stay within a small circle on a mountaintop or in a forest, stripped of their titles, their possessions, and their distractions. Why is this necessary for becoming a better version of yourself? Because you cannot know who you are until you know who you are when there is no one else around to tell you. When you sit in the silence of the nature world for long enough, the ego begins to starve. The loud, demanding voice that cares about your status, your bank account, and your social standing starts to fade because the trees and the rocks do not care about those things. In that starvation, a deeper voice awakens. This is the voice of your purpose. Indigenous wisdom teaches that every human being is born with a medicine, a unique gift that they are meant to bring to the community. But you cannot find your medicine in a crowd. You must go into the great silence to fetch it. You may not be able to spend 4 days on a mountaintop without food, but you can apply the principle of the sacred retreat. Modern stress is often a result of environmental static, too many inputs, too much noise. To reset, you must practice voluntary solitude. This is the act of stepping out of the human-made world and into the earth-made world, not to do something, but to listen. When you spend time alone in nature, you are not escaping reality, you are returning to it. You are stripping away the layers of who you should be to discover who you are. The Vision Quest teaches us that fear is a threshold. On the first night in the wilderness, There is often fear, fear of the dark, fear of the animals, fear of the silence. But if you stay, the fear turns into a profound sense of belonging. You realize the mountain isn't watching you as a stranger, it is holding you as a relative. To become a better version of yourself, you must be brave enough to be silent. You must be willing to let the busy self die so that the true self can breathe. Your vision, your purpose, is already there, waiting for the noise to stop. In our modern existence, we are terrified of being alone. We fill every silence with a podcast, a screen, or a conversation. We have forgotten that silence is not an empty void. It is a crowded room filled with the voices of the self and the spirit that we are usually too busy to hear. In many indigenous cultures, most notably among the Lakota, where it is called Hambalsaya or crying for a vision, and the Anishinaabe, there is a practice that serves as the ultimate forge for the soul, the vision quest. A vision quest is a rite of passage. A person, often a young person seeking their path or an adult seeking guidance, is sent out into the wilderness alone. They take no food, they take no company. For several days and nights, they stay within a small circle on a mountaintop or in a forest, stripped of their titles, their possessions, and their distractions. Why is this necessary for becoming a better version of yourself? Because you cannot know who you are until you know who you are when there is no one else around to tell you. When you sit in the silence of the nature world for long enough, the ego begins to starve. The loud, demanding voice that cares about your status, your bank account, and your social standing starts to fade because the trees and the rocks do not care about those things. In that starvation, a deeper voice awakens. This is the voice of your purpose. Indigenous wisdom teaches that every human being is born with a medicine, a unique gift that they are meant to bring to the community. But you cannot find your medicine in a crowd. You must go into the great silence to fetch it. You may not be able to spend 4 days on a mountaintop without food, but you can apply the principle of the sacred retreat. Modern stress is often a result of environmental static, too many inputs, too much noise. To reset, you must practice voluntary solitude. This is the act of stepping out of the human-made world and into the earth-made world, not to do something, but to listen. When you spend time alone in nature, you are not escaping reality, you are returning to it. You are stripping away the layers of who you should be to discover who you are. The Vision Quest teaches us that fear is a threshold. On the We come now to a word that has been deeply misunderstood, often distorted by the lens of modern cinema and historical stereotypes. In the Western imagination, the Indian warrior is frequently depicted as a figure of aggression, a symbol of fierce combat and conquest. But when we look through the eyes of the Dene, the Comanche, or the Lakota, we find a definition that is far more profound and far more necessary for the modern soul. In the indigenous tradition, a warrior is not someone who loves to fight. A warrior is someone who has taken a vow to protect. The true definition of a warrior, what the Lakota might call an Akasita, is a person of service. They are the ones who stay awake so the community can sleep. They are the ones who hunt so the elders can eat. They are the protectors of the vulnerable, the defenders of the land, and the keepers of the tribe's integrity. To be a warrior is not an exercise in ego. It is an exercise in self-mastery. The first battle of the warrior is never against an external enemy. It is against their own fear, their own laziness, and their own selfishness. A true warrior is a servant leader. They do not lead by the volume of their voice, but by the weight of their character. They are the first to sacrifice and the last to take credit. How does this ancient definition help you become a better version of yourself? It shifts the focus of your development from self-improvement to self-transcendence. Most modern self-help is focused on the I, how I can be richer, how I can be more productive, how I can be happier. But the warrior's path asks, how can I become strong enough to be useful to others? When you view your personal growth as a form of warrior training, your motivation changes. You don't exercise just to look good. You exercise to have the stamina to help those who depend on you. You don't manage your stress just for your own peace. You do it so you can be a non-anxious presence for your family, your team, and your community. The warrior's path is built on 4 virtues. Bravery, not the absence of fear, but the decision that something else is more important than fear. Fortitude, the ability to endure hardship without losing your spirit. Generosity, sharing not just your things, but your time and your strength. Wisdom, the ability to see the truth behind the noise. Becoming a better version of yourself means stepping into this role of the protector. Whether you are a parent, a teacher, an artist, or an entrepreneur, you have a territory to protect, a set of values, a group of people, or a piece of the earth. When you stop living for yourself and start living for the circle, you find a level of strength you never knew you possessed. You find that a life of service is the only life that truly satisfies the human heart. You are no longer just a person trying to survive. You are a warrior for the living world. To speak of the indigenous peoples of the Americas without speaking of resilience would be to leave the story half told. For over 5 centuries, these nations have faced a relentless storm: colonization, the loss of ancestral lands, the outlawing of their languages, and the systemic attempt to dissolve their families through residential schools. This is a history of profound trauma, yet the story does not end in tragedy. It continues in restoration. The resilience we find here is not the toxic positivity often sold in modern wellness, the idea that we should just get over it. Instead, it is a deep, bone-deep strength known as indigenous resilience. It is the ability to maintain one's core identity while navigating a world that is actively trying to change you. The elders teach that trauma can be intergenerational, passed down through the blood and the stories. But they also teach that wisdom and healing are intergenerational. You do not just carry the wounds of those who came before you, you carry their survival. You carry their laughter, their prayers, and their refusal to disappear. When you face your own high-stress days, or when you feel broken by the demands of your life, you can draw upon this ancestral strength. How do you apply this to become a better version of yourself? First, you stop viewing your struggles as signs of weakness. In the indigenous perspective, your scars are evidence of your endurance. Resilience is the act of coming home to yourself even when the house has been damaged. Second, you practice long-term thinking. Indigenous resilience is built on the understanding that healing is not a sprint. It is a relay race. You are doing work today, healing your habits, calming your mind, honoring the earth, that your grandchildren will benefit from. When you feel overwhelmed, remember the 7 generations behind you. You are the dream of an ancestor who survived a winter, a war, or a famine. You are the result of thousands of years of successful adaptation. You are not fragile. You are made of the same stardust and soil that has survived every catastrophe in the history of the world. Becoming a better version of yourself means transforming your wounds into medicine. It means taking the pain you have experienced and using it to develop empathy for others. It means refusing to let the spiral of your past dictate the circle of your future. You are resilient not because you never fall, but because you belong to a lineage of people who always, eventually, found a way to stand back up. In the fast-paced corridors of modern society, we have developed a bias toward the new. We prize the latest technology, the youngest entrepreneurs, and the freshest trends. In our rush toward the future, we have accidentally marginalized our greatest repository of data, the elders. In most indigenous cultures, from the Cherokee to the Pueblo, an elder is not simply an old person. Aging is a biological process, but becoming an elder is a social and spiritual achievement. An elder is someone who has distilled their life experiences into wisdom and who has earned the right to be a keeper of the community's moral compass. Indigenous leadership is fundamentally different from the Western corporate model. It is not based on a title, a salary, or the ability to dominate a room. It is based on respect and humility. A true leader in an indigenous council often speaks last. They listen to the young, they listen to the warriors, they listen to the parents, and then they synthesize that information through the lens of history and spirit. They do not lead by power, they lead by authority. Power is the ability to force others to act. Authority is the quality that makes others want to follow because they trust your vision. To become a better version of yourself, you must integrate the elder mindset into your own leadership, regardless of your age. How do we practice elder leadership? Prioritize listening over speaking. In every interaction, try to be the last one to offer an opinion. Gather the perspectives of the circle first. This isn't a sign of indecision, it is a sign of confidence. Value the long view. An elder doesn't get rattled by a temporary setback. They have seen the seasons change too many times to be fooled by a single storm. When stress hits, ask yourself, how will I look back on this moment 10 years from now? Mentor others. The value of your knowledge is doubled when you give it away. In the Indigenous tradition, you haven't truly mastered a skill until you have successfully taught it to someone else. By adopting the elder mindset, you remove the ego from your leadership. You stop trying to be the most important person in the room and start trying to be the most useful. You realize that your life is not a solo performance. It is a contribution to collective wisdom. When you respect the old ones within and without, you gain access to a perspective that is steady, calm, and profoundly effective. You become a leader who doesn't just manage tasks, but who nourishes souls. We have reached the end of this spoken journey, but in the circle of life, every end is merely the soil for a new beginning. We have traveled from the physiological reset of the breath to the ancient ethics of the honorable harvest. We have mapped our internal world with the medicine wheel and learned to listen to the great silence. Now we arrive at the final, most transformative question of your personal evolution. What kind of ancestor will you be? In our modern culture, we are taught to worry about what we will leave behind, our bank accounts, our property, our titles, but the Indigenous path asks you to consider what you are living forward. You are, at this very moment, an ancestor in training. The way you speak to a stranger, the way you treat the water, the way you handle your anger, and the way you honor your word, these are the seeds of your legacy. Becoming a better version of yourself is not a destination you reach and then stop. It is a commitment to a way of being. To walk this path is to live with the awareness that you are a link in a chain that stretches back to the beginning of time and forward into a future you will never see. To integrate the warrior's path and the legacy of the ancestors, I invite you to make these final commitments. 1. Live by the good track. Every morning, as you set your intention, ask, if someone follows the tracks I leave today, where will they end up? Choose to leave tracks of kindness, resilience, and respect. 2. Protect the living world. Find one small way to be a warrior for the earth. It could be planting a native tree, reducing your waste, or simply advocating for the protection of a local park. Remember, the land is not a resource, it is a relative. 3. Honor your medicine. Do not try to be someone else. The world does not need you to be a copy of another. It needs the unique medicine you were born with. Trust your vision, trust your silence. As this audio concludes, do not simply return to the noise. Carry the silence of the mountain with you. Carry the rhythm of the seasons in your step. Carry the words before all else in your heart. You are no longer just managing stress. You are walking in beauty. You are no longer overwhelmed. You are connected. You are an indigenous soul on a living earth, and your journey has just begun.
Thank you for sharing this moment of reflection with me. If this chapter resonated with you, please let us know by leaving a thumbs up and sharing your favorite insight in the comments. By subscribing, you help these stories reach more hearts seeking balance. I look forward to continuing this path with you in the next part. Until then, walk in beauty.